Sarah Martinez had dreamed of serving her country since she was 12 years old. Growing up in a small Texas town, she watched military helicopters fly overhead during training exercises and knew that was her calling. Now, at 23, she stood at the gates of the most challenging military training facility in the country. The morning sun cast long shadows across the drill field as Sarah adjusted her gear one final time. She had worked 2 jobs for 3 years to get in shape and save money for this moment. Her calloused hands told the story of countless hours spent training, preparing, and pushing her body to its limits. Commander Jackson walked down the line of new recruits, his steel-gray eyes sizing up each candidate. When he reached Sarah, he paused longer than usual. She could feel the weight of his stare, but she kept her eyes straight ahead, chin up, shoulders back. "You sure you're in the right place, Martinez?" he asked, his voice carrying across the silent formation. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied without hesitation. The first week was brutal. Every morning began at 4:30 with a 5-mile run through mud and obstacles that seemed designed to break spirits rather than build strength. Sarah kept pace with the men, sometimes pulling ahead during the rope climbs and endurance tests. Her small frame worked to her advantage in tight spaces, and her determination never wavered. But she noticed the looks. Some of the male recruits whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. A few instructors seemed to watch her more closely, waiting for her to fail. She ignored it all and focused on the mission. During combat training, Sarah excelled. Her accuracy with weapons was among the highest in her class. She could field strip and reassemble equipment faster than most of her peers. When they practiced medical procedures under pressure, her steady hands and clear thinking stood out. Yet somehow, it was never enough. "Martinez, you're 5 seconds too slow on that obstacle course," Sergeant Williams would bark, even when her time matched or beat others who received praise. "Your form needs work," another instructor commented after she completed a flawless set of exercises. Sarah began staying after hours, running extra drills, perfecting techniques that were already superior to many in her class. Her bunkmates found her studying field manuals by flashlight long after lights out. She was determined to be undeniably excellent. The psychological evaluations were the hardest part. Sarah sat across from Dr. Reynolds, a woman in her 50s who had evaluated thousands of military candidates over her career. "Tell me about your motivation," Dr. Reynolds said, pen poised over her notepad. "I want to serve my country and protect people who can't protect themselves," Sarah answered honestly. "And you think you can handle the pressure of special operations?" "I know I can." Dr. Reynolds made notes that Sarah couldn't see. The questions continued for over an hour, probing every aspect of her mental toughness, her ability to work under extreme stress, and her commitment to the mission above personal safety. 3 weeks into training, Sarah had proven herself in every measurable way. Her scores were in the top 10% of her class. She had completed every challenge, passed every test, and demonstrated the exact qualities the program claimed to seek. That's when Commander Jackson called her into his office. The small room smelled of coffee and old leather. Military commendations covered one wall, and a large American flag hung behind his desk. Sarah stood at attention while he reviewed her file. "Sit down, Martinez," he said finally. Sarah took the chair across from his desk, maintaining perfect posture despite the growing knot in her stomach. "You're a fine soldier," Commander Jackson began, and Sarah felt a moment of hope. "Your test scores are excellent. Your physical performance has been outstanding." "Thank you, sir. But this program isn't just about individual excellence. It's about team cohesion, unit effectiveness, and mission success in the most dangerous situations imaginable." Sarah's heart began to pound, but she kept her expression neutral. "After careful consideration and consultation with my staff, we've decided that you're not the right fit for this particular program." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Sir, may I ask what I need to improve?" "This isn't about improvement, Martinez. Some things can't be trained or fixed. You have the skills, but you don't have what this unit needs." Sarah felt the room spinning slightly. She had given everything, sacrificed years of her life preparing for this moment, and now it was being taken away with no clear explanation. "I understand, sir," she managed to say, though understanding was the last thing she felt. "You'll be processed out this afternoon. Transportation has been arranged to take you back to civilian processing. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Sarah stood, saluted crisply, and walked out of the office with her head high. Inside, her world was crumbling. But she refused to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. The next few hours passed in a blur. Sarah packed her gear, said goodbye to the few recruits who had become friends, and found herself standing at the same gates where her dreams had begun just 3 weeks earlier. The bus that would take her away from everything she had worked for idled nearby. Other dismissed recruits sat in dejected silence. But Sarah stared out the window at the drill field where she had proven herself day after day. As the bus pulled away, she pressed her face against the glass for one last look at the place that had rejected her. The flag snapped in the afternoon breeze, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of helicopters conducting training exercises. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to figure out what came next. Everything she had planned, everything she had dreamed of, was driving away behind her. At 23, she felt like her life was over before it had really begun. The bus ride back to civilian life felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. She stared out the window at the passing landscape, each mile taking her further from her dreams and deeper into an uncertain future. The other dismissed recruits sat in silence, each lost in their own disappointment and confusion. When Sarah finally arrived back home in Eagle Pass, Texas, the familiar sights of her small town felt different. The streets she had walked as a child now seemed smaller, more confining. Her mother, Rosa Martinez, was waiting at the bus station with tears in her eyes and a forced smile on her face. "Mija, you tried your best," Rosa said, wrapping her daughter in a tight embrace. "That's all anyone can ask for." But Sarah knew her best hadn't been enough, and the knowledge ate at her like acid. She moved back into her childhood bedroom, surrounded by high school trophies and college acceptance letters she had turned down to pursue her military dreams. For 2 weeks, Sarah barely left her room. She replayed every moment of training in her mind, searching for the fatal flaw that had led to her dismissal. Had she been too aggressive during combat exercises? Not aggressive enough? Was it something she said during the psychological evaluation? The uncertainty was almost worse than the rejection itself. Her father, Miguel, a mechanic who had immigrated from Mexico 30 years earlier, tried to understand his daughter's pain. One evening, he knocked on her bedroom door and entered without waiting for permission. "Sarah, you cannot stay in here forever," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I know this hurts, but you are stronger than this disappointment." "Dad, you don't understand," Sarah replied, her voice hoarse from days of silent tears. "This wasn't just a job. This was everything I worked for, everything I am." "No, Mija. What you are is not determined by what others think of you. You are determined by how you respond to setbacks." Despite her father's wisdom, Sarah struggled to find direction. She took a job at the local grocery store, mindlessly stocking shelves and operating the cash register while her mind remained focused on what she had lost. Customers who knew her story offered sympathy that felt more like pity, and Sarah found herself avoiding eye contact and conversation whenever possible. 3 months after her dismissal, Sarah was closing the store alone on a Tuesday night when she heard commotion outside. Through the large front windows, she could see smoke rising from the direction of the train tracks that ran behind the shopping center. Without thinking, Sarah locked the register and ran toward the smoke. As she got closer, she could hear screaming and the sound of twisted metal. A freight train had derailed, and several cars had tipped over near a small residential area. The first thing Sarah noticed was the smell, a chemical odor that made her eyes water and her throat burn. One of the derailed cars was leaking something toxic, and a thick green cloud was spreading toward a row of small houses where families were just sitting down to dinner. Sarah pulled out her cell phone to call 911, but she could see that someone had already done so. Emergency vehicles were arriving, but they seemed confused and disorganized. Firefighters were arguing about approach routes while paramedics stood by their ambulances, apparently waiting for orders. What Sarah saw next made her blood run cold. Through the toxic smoke, she could make out movement in one of the houses closest to the spill. A family was trapped inside, probably unaware of the danger approaching their home. Sarah looked around for someone in charge, someone with the authority to coordinate a rescue. She found Fire Chief Martinez, no relation, despite the shared name, standing near his truck with a radio in his hand, clearly overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. "Chief, there are people in that house," Sarah shouted over the noise of sirens and generators. "I know, but we can't approach until the hazmat team gets here. That chemical cloud could kill anyone who goes in there." "How long until they arrive?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. Sarah looked at the spreading cloud and did quick calculations in her head based on wind speed and direction. In 20 minutes, that family would be dead. "I can get them out," she said. Chief Martinez looked at her skeptically. "Who are you? Are you trained for hazmat situations?" "I'm trained for a lot of things," Sarah replied. "And, right now, I'm the best chance they have." Before the chief could stop her, Sarah was running toward her car. In the trunk, she kept an emergency kit that included a basic respirator mask, not military grade, but better than nothing. She also had rope, a flashlight, and basic first aid supplies. Sarah pulled on the respirator and approached the house from the upwind side, staying low to avoid the worst of the chemical cloud. The front door was locked, but she could see movement through a window. A family of 4, 2 adults and 2 small children, were inside, beginning to show signs of chemical exposure. Sarah broke the window with a rock and climbed inside. The father, a man in his 30s named Carlos, was conscious but disoriented. His wife, Maria, was holding their 2-year-old daughter while their 5-year-old son sat on the floor, crying and rubbing his eyes. "We need to get out of here now," Sarah told them, speaking Spanish when she realized they were more comfortable with their native language. "There's been a chemical spill, and this area isn't safe." Carlos tried to stand, but stumbled. The chemical exposure was affecting his coordination. Sarah realized she would have to help them move while fighting the effects of the toxins herself. Working quickly, Sarah helped Maria wrap the baby in a damp towel to protect her from chemical exposure. She picked up the 5-year-old boy and told Carlos to hold onto her belt as they moved toward the broken window. The journey back to safety felt like miles instead of yards. Sarah's lungs burned, and her eyes streamed tears that had nothing to do with emotion. The weight of the child and the need to guide Carlos while maintaining her own balance pushed her to the edge of her physical capabilities. When they finally reached the emergency vehicles, paramedics rushed to treat the family while Sarah collapsed on the ground, gasping for air and fighting nausea from chemical exposure. Chief Martinez knelt beside her as an EMT checked her vital signs. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid," he said. "You could have been killed." "But they weren't," Sarah managed to say between coughing fits. The local newspaper ran a story about the rescue the next day, complete with Sarah's photo and a detailed account of her actions. The article mentioned her recent military training and painted her as a local hero who had stepped up when professional responders couldn't act. Sarah tried to downplay the attention, but the story had legs. Within a week, it had been picked up by state news outlets, and soon after, national media began calling for interviews. More importantly, Sarah began receiving calls from people she had never expected to hear from again. The first call came on a Thursday morning while Sarah was getting ready for her shift at the grocery store. The number was blocked, and when she answered, a crisp voice identified himself as Colonel James Mitchell from the Department of Defense. "Ms. Martinez, I've been following the news coverage of your recent actions during the train derailment. I'd like to discuss some opportunities that might interest you." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What kind of opportunities, sir?" "The kind that require discretion. Are you available to meet this afternoon?" "I can be at the Eagle Pass Diner at 3 o'clock. Sarah agreed, her mind racing with possibilities. She called in sick to work, the first time she had ever done so, and spent the morning trying to decide what to wear to meet a colonel she had never heard of. Colonel Mitchell was exactly what Sarah expected from a career military officer. Tall, silver-haired, and wearing civilian clothes that somehow still looked like a uniform. He sat in a corner booth with his back to the wall and a clear view of the door. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming," he said, standing to shake her hand. "Please sit down. Can I buy you coffee?" Sarah ordered coffee, but barely touched it as Colonel Mitchell explained why he was there. "Your recent actions caught the attention of people who monitor emergency response situations. The chemical spill presented a complex rescue scenario that required quick thinking, physical courage, and the ability to work effectively under extreme stress. It just seemed like the right thing to do, Sarah replied. That's exactly the kind of instinctive response we look for. Tell me about your military training. Sarah found herself recounting her 3 weeks at the training facility, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice as she described her dismissal. Commander Jackson is a good man, but he's old school, Colonel Mitchell said when she finished. He believes that certain units work best with traditional compositions. There are others of us who believe that effectiveness matters more than tradition. I'm not sure I understand, sir. Ms. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you cannot be repeated to anyone, including your family. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, though her stomach was churning with nervous energy. There are military units that don't officially exist. Units that handle situations too sensitive or too dangerous for conventional forces. These units recruit from people who have demonstrated exceptional abilities under real-world conditions. Sarah felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to serve your country in ways that most people never could. The work is dangerous, the hours are unpredictable, and you'll never be able to tell anyone what you really do for a living. What would my family think I was doing? Consulting work for a government contractor. Boring paperwork and occasional travel. The kind of job that pays well but doesn't make for interesting dinner conversation. Sarah thought about the train derailment, about the feeling of knowing she could help but having no official authority to do so. What kind of situations would I be handling? Hostage rescues where diplomatic solutions have failed. Extraction of intelligence assets from hostile territories. Interdiction of weapons shipments that threaten national security. Operations where failure isn't an option and success can't be acknowledged. Colonel Mitchell slid a business card across the table. It was completely blank except for a phone number. If you're interested, call this number tomorrow at exactly 10 in the morning. Someone will give you instructions for the next step. If you're not interested, throw the card away, and we never had this conversation. After he left, Sarah sat in the diner for another hour, staring at the blank card and trying to process what had just happened. Was this real, or was someone playing an elaborate joke on her? The colonel had seemed legitimate, but the whole situation felt like something out of a movie. That evening, Sarah found herself walking the streets of Eagle Pass, trying to sort through her emotions. The town that had felt suffocating when she returned from her failed training now seemed almost peaceful. She passed the houses where she had grown up, the school where she had first dreamed of military service, the park where she had trained for hours in preparation for that dream. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. Dinner at 6. Your father made tamales. Sarah almost smiled. Her father's tamales were legendary in their neighborhood, and he only made them for special occasions or when he thought someone needed comfort food. At dinner, Sarah found it almost impossible to concentrate on conversation. Her parents talked about local news, asked about her day at work, and discussed plans for her cousin's upcoming wedding. All perfectly normal family dinner conversation that felt surreal given what had happened that afternoon. Mija, you seem distracted, her mother observed. Is everything okay? Just thinking about things, Sarah replied. About what I want to do with my life. Her father set down his fork and studied her face. You've been different since the train incident. More like the daughter we knew before the military disappointment. Sarah realized he was right. For the first time since her dismissal, she felt like herself again. The rescue had reminded her of who she was and what she was capable of. But was she ready to risk another rejection, another failure? That night, Sarah researched everything she could find about Colonel Mitchell and mysterious military units. She found almost nothing concrete, which somehow made his story more believable rather than less. Truly classified operations wouldn't leave digital footprints that a grocery store clerk could find on the internet. She thought about the family she had rescued, Carlos, Maria, and their 2 children. They had sent her a card thanking her for saving their lives, written in careful English with Spanish phrases mixed in. That card was pinned to her bedroom wall, a reminder that sometimes the most important work happened when no one was watching and no one would ever know what you had done. At 9:30 the next morning, Sarah sat in her car outside the grocery store, holding the blank business card and staring at her phone. She had arrived early for her shift, but instead of going inside, she found herself paralyzed by the biggest decision of her life. Her phone alarm chimed, indicating it was exactly 10 o'clock. Sarah dialed the number. "Good morning." A professional female voice answered on the first ring. "We've been expecting your call. Please drive to the Walmart parking lot and look for a black SUV with Texas plates beginning with the letters BMK. Park 2 spaces to the left of the SUV and wait." The line went dead. Sarah's hands were shaking as she started her car and drove the 3 blocks to Walmart. The parking lot was busy with morning shoppers, but she spotted the black SUV immediately. It was parked away from other vehicles, and she could see a figure sitting in the driver's seat. She parked where instructed and waited, her heart pounding so hard she was sure it was visible through her shirt. After exactly 5 minutes, a woman in her 40s approached Sarah's car and tapped on the window. She was dressed casually, but moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Agent Thompson. Please follow me." Sarah got into the passenger seat of the SUV, where Agent Thompson handed her a tablet computer. "What you're about to see is classified at the highest levels. You'll need to provide biometric confirmation of your identity before we proceed." The tablet prompted Sarah to place her thumb on a scanner, look into a small camera for retinal identification, and speak her full name and birth date for voice recognition. Within seconds, the device confirmed her identity and displayed a new screen. "Welcome to Project Nightingale," Agent Thompson said. "Your real training begins now." The tablet screen displayed information that made Sarah's previous military training look like summer camp. Project Nightingale was a joint operation between multiple agencies, designed to handle situations that fell outside the scope of traditional military or law enforcement responses. The training facility is located in Nevada, Agent Thompson explained as she drove through the Texas countryside. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's where we prepare operatives for missions that require a unique combination of military skills, intelligence analysis, and adaptability under extreme pressure." Sarah studied the mission profiles scrolling across the tablet screen. Hostage rescues in unstable foreign countries. Interdiction of human trafficking networks. Extraction of intelligence assets whose covers had been blown. Each operation required months of planning, split-second decision-making, and the ability to work with minimal support in hostile environments. "Why me?" Sarah asked. "There have to be hundreds of people better qualified for this kind of work. Better qualified on paper, maybe. But qualification isn't just about test scores and physical fitness. It's about making the right decisions when there's no manual to follow and no backup plan." Agent Thompson pulled into a small regional airport where a private jet was waiting. Sarah had never been on a private aircraft, and the luxury felt strange given what she had learned about her destination. During the flight, Agent Thompson briefed Sarah on what to expect during the next phase of training. "Unlike your previous experience, this program doesn't eliminate candidates for arbitrary reasons. If you make it through the initial screening, you'll be given increasingly challenging scenarios designed to test your judgment, creativity, and ability to work as part of a specialized team." How long does the training last? 6 months of intensive preparation, followed by a probationary period during which you'll participate in real operations under close supervision. If you successfully complete that phase, you become a full operative. The aircraft landed at a nondescript airfield in the middle of the Nevada desert. Sarah could see buildings in the distance, but the facility looked more like a corporate retreat than a military installation. Her roommate was Rebecca Chun, a former Air Force pilot who had been recruited after successfully landing a damaged aircraft that saved the lives of 200 passengers. Rebecca's background was in aviation and electronics, complementing Sarah's strengths in ground operations and emergency response. "The first month is all about unlearning conventional military thinking," Rebecca explained as they settled into their shared quarters. "Everything you thought you knew about following orders and operating within established protocols gets thrown out the window." The training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Instead of drill sergeants screaming orders, instructors presented complex scenarios and asked trainees to develop their own solutions. Instead of memorizing procedures, they learned to improvise with whatever resources were available. Sarah excelled at the problem-solving exercises. When presented with a hostage situation involving chemical weapons, she designed an extraction plan that used commercial cleaning supplies to neutralize the threat while conventional forces provided distraction. When tasked with infiltrating a heavily guarded compound, she proposed using a food delivery service as cover for reconnaissance. But the psychological training was the most challenging aspect of the program. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a specialist in operational psychology, pushed trainees to understand their own motivations and limitations. "Tell me about your dismissal from conventional military training," Dr. Warren said during one of their sessions. "I was told I wasn't the right fit for the unit," Sarah replied. "Do you believe that assessment was accurate?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "I think I was exactly what that unit needed, but not what they were comfortable accepting." "And how does that experience influence your commitment to this program?" "It makes me more determined to prove that effectiveness matters more than fitting someone else's expectations." Dr. Warren made notes, but didn't comment further. These sessions were designed to identify psychological vulnerabilities that could compromise operations, but Sarah gradually realized they also served another purpose: helping operatives understand themselves well enough to make life-or-death decisions under extreme stress. 3 months into training, Sarah participated in her first field exercise. The scenario involved rescuing an intelligence asset from a simulated hostile environment, with real actors playing the roles of enemy forces and civilians caught in the crossfire. Sarah's team included 5 other trainees with diverse backgrounds: a former police detective, an ex-Marine sniper, a computer specialist who had worked for the NSA, a linguist who spoke 7 languages, and a medic who had served with Doctors Without Borders. The mission began to go wrong almost immediately. Intelligence reports about enemy positions turned out to be outdated. The extraction point was compromised by unexpected civilian activity. Weather conditions grounded the helicopter that was supposed to provide air support. "We need to abort," the team leader suggested after their third contingency plan fell apart. "No," Sarah said, studying a map of the area. "We adapt." Sarah proposed using the civilian activity as cover rather than avoiding it. By blending into a local market, they could approach the target building without being detected by enemy surveillance. The plan required splitting the team and coordinating movements through crowded, unpredictable terrain. The rescue succeeded, but barely. Sarah's improvised plan worked, but several team members were killed during the extraction because of risks she had failed to anticipate. During the debriefing, the instructor criticized every aspect of the operation while acknowledging that the core objective had been achieved. "In the real world, we don't grade on a curve," he explained. "Success means everyone comes home alive, not just completing the primary mission." Sarah spent the next 2 weeks analyzing what had gone wrong and developing better risk assessment protocols. She realized that her confidence in her own abilities sometimes led her to underestimate dangers that others might face. This became a recurring theme throughout her training. Sarah was consistently among the top performers in individual exercises, but learning to work effectively as part of a team required her to balance her natural leadership instincts with respect for her teammates' expertise and limitations. The breakthrough came during a training exercise that simulated a school shooting. Sarah's team was tasked with neutralizing the threat while minimizing civilian casualties, but they arrived to find that local law enforcement had already cordoned off the building and established a command structure. Instead of taking over or working around the existing response, Sarah approached the local commander and offered her team's specialized capabilities as support for the ongoing operation. By integrating with existing resources rather than replacing them, they were able to end the crisis more quickly and effectively than either group could have managed alone. "That's what we've been looking for," Dr. Warren told Sarah after the exercise. "The ability to be effective without needing to be in control." By the end of 6 months, Sarah had developed skills she hadn't known were possible. She could pick locks, analyze intelligence reports, provide emergency medical care, operate advanced communication equipment, and coordinate with law enforcement agencies around the world. More importantly, she had learned to trust her instincts while respecting the expertise of others. The confidence that had served her well during individual challenges was now balanced with the humility that came from understanding how much she still didn't know. On graduation day, Sarah stood with 11 other new operatives as Colonel Mitchell addressed the group. You are now part of something that most people will never know exists, he said. Your work will save lives, protect national interests, and preserve freedoms that civilians take for granted. But you'll never receive public recognition, and you'll never be able to share the details of what you do with anyone outside this community. Sarah thought about her parents, who believed she was starting a consulting job with a government contractor. They were proud of her new career, even though they didn't really understand what kind of consulting she would be doing. That evening, Sarah called home to let her family know she had completed her training program. Mija, we're so proud of you, her mother said. When do you start your real job? Tomorrow, Mom. I start tomorrow. Sarah's first real mission came just 2 weeks after graduation. She was eating breakfast in the Nevada facility cafeteria when Agent Thompson approached with a tablet containing encrypted mission files. Pack your gear for cold weather operations, Thompson said. You leave for Alaska in 3 hours. The mission briefing revealed that a research station in the remote Alaskan wilderness had gone silent during a blizzard. The facility was conducting classified environmental research, and the last communication suggested that the team had discovered something significant before losing contact. Sarah's assignment was to reach the station, determine what had happened to the research team, and secure any sensitive materials before an approaching storm made the area inaccessible for weeks. The helicopter pilot, a grizzled veteran named Murphy, looked skeptical as he reviewed the weather reports. This storm is going to be a monster, he warned. We'll have maybe a 4-hour window before conditions become impossible. Sarah studied satellite images of the research station during the flight north. The facility was located on a remote plateau, accessible only by helicopter or a 3-day hike through treacherous mountain terrain. 6 researchers had been stationed there, led by Dr. Amanda Foster, a climatologist with 20 years of experience in polar environments. The approaching storm was visible on the horizon as Murphy set the helicopter down in the station's landing area. Snow was already falling heavily, and the wind was picking up strength. For hours, Murphy repeated as Sarah jumped out. If you're not back by then, I can't wait. The next extraction opportunity won't come for at least 2 weeks. Sarah nodded and activated her communications equipment. Base, this is Nightingale 1. I'm on station and beginning investigation. The research facility appeared intact from the outside, but something felt wrong. No lights were visible through the windows, and there were no signs of human activity despite the fact that the team should have been preparing for the storm. Sarah checked her weapons and approached the main building carefully. Her training had taught her that missing person situations often involved hostile actors, and the remote location would be perfect for eliminating witnesses to whatever the research team had discovered. The front door was unlocked, which immediately raised red flags. In a remote location during dangerous weather, no one would leave external doors unsecured unless something had prevented them from following standard safety protocols. Inside, Sarah found evidence of rapid evacuation. Research equipment was still running, but personal belongings had been hastily packed. Computer screens displayed data streams that continued to update, suggesting that whatever research was being conducted was still ongoing. Sarah photographed everything while searching for clues about what had happened to the team. In Dr. Foster's office, she found a handwritten note hidden under a keyboard. They know what we found. Trust no one from the outside. Emergency protocols in effect. This changed everything. Instead of a rescue operation, Sarah was now investigating a potential security breach that had forced a research team into hiding. Sarah activated her emergency communications protocol and contacted her handler directly. Base, I need to speak with Colonel Mitchell immediately. We have a potential hostile situation. While waiting for instructions, Sarah continued her investigation. In the facility's basement laboratory, she discovered the source of the team's concern. They had been monitoring atmospheric conditions when they detected unusual chemical signatures that suggested the presence of weapons-grade materials in the surrounding area. The research data indicated that someone was using the remote Alaskan wilderness to test or store chemical weapons, and the research team had stumbled onto evidence of these activities. Sarah's communications equipment crackled with an incoming message from Colonel Mitchell. Nightingale 1. You are now operating under hostile conditions. Locate the research team and extract them along with all relevant data. Secondary mission, identify and assess the threat they discovered. Sarah realized that the research team was likely hiding somewhere in the facility or nearby buildings. But she also knew that whoever they were hiding from might return at any time. She began a systematic search of the complex, using techniques she had learned for clearing buildings in hostile territory. In a storage building behind the main facility, she heard voices. The research team was barricaded in a supply room, using emergency communications equipment to monitor radio traffic. "Dr. Foster," Sarah called out, identifying herself with codes that only legitimate government personnel would know. "I'm here to extract you and your team." The door opened slowly, revealing 6 frightened but determined researchers who had been hiding for over 36 hours. "Thank God," Dr. Foster said. "We weren't sure if anyone was going to believe us." Dr. Foster quickly explained what they had discovered. Satellite imagery had detected unusual heat signatures in a valley about 20 miles from their location. When they investigated, they found evidence of recent chemical weapons testing, including soil samples that contained traces of banned substances. "We were preparing to report our findings when we detected aircraft approaching our location," Dr. Foster continued. "Unmarked helicopters that weren't part of any scheduled operations. We implemented emergency protocols and went into hiding." Sarah checked her watch. The extraction helicopter would return in 90 minutes, but she now had 7 people to evacuate along with sensitive research data and evidence of potential war crimes. She activated her communications equipment and contacted Murphy. "Extraction pilot, this is Nightingale 1. I need immediate pickup for 7 passengers plus equipment. Hostile aircraft may be in the area." "Copy that," Murphy replied. "I'm already en route. Storm's moving faster than predicted, so we need to move quickly." Sarah organized the evacuation with military efficiency. The research team packed their most critical data while she established a security perimeter around the landing area. Her training had taught her that extraction operations were the most vulnerable phase of any mission. As they waited for the helicopter, Sarah noticed movement in the distance. 2 unmarked aircraft were approaching from the south, flying low to avoid radar detection. "Everyone into the main building immediately," Sarah ordered. "We have hostile aircraft inbound." Sarah used her emergency communications to contact Colonel Mitchell directly. "Base, we have hostile aircraft approaching extraction site. Requesting immediate air support." "Negative, Nightingale 1. No military assets are available in your area. You need to handle this situation with available resources." Sarah realized she was on her own with 6 civilians and limited defensive capabilities. But her training had prepared her for exactly this kind of scenario. She positioned the research team in the most secure part of the facility and set up defensive positions using equipment from her tactical kit. When the hostile aircraft landed, Sarah was ready. 2 teams of armed men in winter gear approached the facility from different directions. Sarah could see that they were well-equipped and professionally trained, but they were expecting to find frightened researchers, not a prepared operative. Using diversionary tactics she had learned during training, Sarah created the impression that the facility was still occupied while actually moving the research team toward a secondary evacuation site she had identified during her initial reconnaissance. The plan worked perfectly. While the hostile forces breached the main building, Sarah was leading the research team through a concealed route to a clearing where Murphy could land despite the worsening weather conditions. The extraction helicopter arrived just as the hostile forces realized they had been deceived. Sarah and the research team were airborne within minutes, carrying evidence that would later lead to the exposure of an international weapons trafficking network. During the flight back to safety, Dr. Foster thanked Sarah for risking her life to save theirs. "Just doing my job," Sarah replied. But she felt a deep satisfaction that had been missing since her dismissal from conventional military training. 6 months later, Sarah was preparing for another mission when she received an unexpected visitor. Commander Jackson, the man who had dismissed her from military training, was waiting in Colonel Mitchell's office. "Ms. Martinez," Commander Jackson said, standing when she entered. "I owe you an apology." Sarah remained at attention, unsure how to respond. "I recently learned about Project Nightingale and your work with the program. It seems I was wrong about your potential for military service." "Sir, I appreciate you saying that. But I understand why you made the decision you did." "No, you don't," Commander Jackson replied. I made that decision based on prejudice and outdated thinking about who could serve effectively in special operations. Your recent work has proven that effectiveness matters more than fitting traditional expectations. Colonel Mitchell stepped forward. Commander Jackson has recommended that Project Nightingale be expanded to recruit from candidates who might not fit conventional military profiles, but who demonstrate the qualities we really need. Sarah realized that her dismissal and subsequent success had opened doors for other people who might have been overlooked by traditional military recruiting. Your first mission was just the beginning, Colonel Mitchell continued. Are you ready for whatever comes next? Sarah thought about the scared grocery store clerk who had been dismissed from military training less than 2 years earlier. That person felt like a stranger now, replaced by someone who understood that true service meant being ready for anything, anywhere, at any time. Yes, sir, she replied. I'm ready. Outside, a helicopter was warming up for departure. Sarah's next mission was waiting, and somewhere in the world, people she would never meet were depending on her to make the right decisions when there were no good options left. Sarah grabbed her gear and walked toward the helicopter, knowing that her real military career had finally begun. She had been kicked out of training, but she had found her way back to exactly where she belonged.